Okay, and we are live. So, welcome everybody to this masterclass developing powerful strategic plans. So basically, I'm introducing Lisa Carlin, who grew up in South Africa, where she experienced apartheid in its truest form. Complete unfairness of the system drove her to become extremely passionate about transformation and to give a voice to those who don't have one. After an early career with McKinsey and Accenture, Lisa has run her own global advisory business since 1999. Her business is part of Future Builders Group, which she co founded. Lisa is the author of the globally acclaimed newsletter Turbocharge Weekly, read by over 7,000 business leaders. Her portfolio includes mentoring CEOs and executives in the tech sector. Her mantra is communities magnify momentum. And so, this masterclass, developing powerful strategic plans. Join us for an insightful masterclass led by Lisa Carlin, where we'll tackle the crucial task of developing our plans and priorities in the face of today's rapid cha- changes in the operating landscape. Welcome, Lisa.
Hello, Christian, and thank you for the lovely introduction. And hello, everybody. I'm very delighted to be here tonight, which is in Sydney, this morning, if you're in either UK or Europe or, yeah, anywhere else in the world, probably. A good evening if you're in Asia. So today, what I am looking forward to discussing with you, I will first talk about demystifying planning and all the different types of planning and talk about prioritization. Then, secondly, I'll talk about what the best and worst leaders do in the space. And then we'll conclude with some tips for saving you time in your planning. At the very end, I'm going to ask you a question to put into the chat. And that is, what's one thing that you're going to be doing differently in your planning to ensure a sensational 2024? Have a think about that as we're going through the presentation. So, Christian, if you can jump 2 slides to you can't get to the unicorn zone by pushing
Yes.
harder. Thank you. So, what do I mean by that? The unicorn zone is that magical zone we all want to get to. If we're running small, high growth businesses, many of you, or in the tech world, you'll know that the unicorn zone is a business with a business value of $1 billion or more. But I'm referring to it as that magical zone where we all want to get to, where everything just seems like it's working well and we're all in alignment and we're actually poised to be $1 million plus business. And the fact is that you really can't get to that magical unicorn zone by pushing harder. You must create a pull effect. So if you think of bees in a beehive, individually they aren't very powerful, but together they punch well above their weight, working together in a colony, creating honey, and they all just seem to be well in alignment, having that pull effect all in the same direction. So the question that I'm going to explore with you as I look at planning is how you create a pull effect with your planning. And it needs to have 3 disciplines. So if we can move to the next slide, Christian, and I will explain to you our Future Builders Strategy Execution Framework. And it has 3 components in the middle. So some of you will come from a business perspective. Maybe you've had a finance background or a marketing background or a technology background, for example. Some of you will approach strategy execution from a change management background, if that's your focus. And some of you will be project managers and you will be doing execution through a project management or project governance lens. The thing is when you are executing strategy, and I include planning in there, you need to take an integrated perspective. If you do that, that will give you the and adjust each of those perspectives to the culture, the workplace culture that you're working in. That is the magic for success, and that will give you that flywheel effect to ROI and to innovation. And those of you who do I'm going to ask you to put into your chat just so that I can start uh, seeing who's on the call. Anyone here do workouts in a gym in a spin class? Has anyone done a spin class? So Christian, can people put their comments into the chat that we can see?
We're just waiting for
Oh, you're turning it
him
on.
to.
Okay. Well, I'll
Yes.
explain to you in the meantime. I love a spin class, and I think it's a great cardiovascular workout. And at the back of the spin bike is a very heavy wheel, and that's called a flywheel. That is a flywheel, and what it does is it stores rotational energy. So when you start pressing down on the pedal, it's a little bit hard to get going, but once you start going, it speeds up much faster because that heavy wheel stores that rotational energy. That's what a flywheel is all about. So if you just take a bit of time to plan out your strategy execution up front and think about things from that multidisciplinary perspective, and think about the culture that you're in, that is what gives you that flywheel effect to go forward really fast. So the business perspective, even if you come from just one of those circles, if you can think from that middle of that circle, then you will have much more impact. So if you think from the business perspective, that means really thinking about the business direction that you're going in. So if you taking a road trip, for example, from let's say you're going from Germany to the UK. Okay, and that business perspective is where you headed, right? So let's say you are heading to London. That's your destination, somewhere in London. That business perspective, that is the equivalent of the direction, the precision of where you headed. The change management represents all the people that are going to help you along that road trip. And it might be somebody traveling in the car with you, and it might be people helping you along the way with, food and petrol and things like that. So, and that represents the change management, is the people that take you along the journey. And then the project management is your plan. So where are you going to stop along the way, and have you got so that's your project management. And then the project governance is actually having the road, having the car that you're going to travel in, or whatever the vehicle is. So all of those components are really important. I'm sure you'll agree with me if you're heading on a road trip. And there's one other really important thing, and that is the terrain that you're traveling through. Because if you don't know the terrain, if you don't know what weather to expect and what road conditions are like and speed limits and all those sorts of things, then you aren't going to be very successful in getting to London by car from Germany. And that represents the culture. So what in an organization, it's the equivalent of the culture. That is the terrain that you're driving through. So you need all of those components with strategy execution. And as I go through some examples with planning, you'll see exactly what I mean by that. Now we're going to move on to the next slide, which is to demystify planning. Thank you. And what I want to do is just explain to you how all these different components fit together, because your terminology might be different to mine. So you need a purpose, and there's usually cascades out of a purpose being the reason for being for a business, okay? Then you've got a strategy, which is the direction you're headed in, and those are really the choices that a business needs to make to fulfill the purpose. Then you've got business plans, which are long-term goals, objectives, and priorities, team plans, and then specific plans for a project. So those are the kind of, and the business plans might be, you might have marketing plans, you might have sales plans for each different function or each different a part of the business, or those could be your team plans. Like you could refer to them as team plans. So there's a little bit of crossover there. Or your business plan might be for the whole of your business. So it depends what part of the business you're in, and that's why I just wanted to show you those terms, because they're used fairly interchangeably and a bit differently in different places. Moving on to the next slide, then, you can see what I've called out is that great strategy calls for choices. So that's the most important thing with strategy, is that there's a choice in what you're going to do, and it's about what you're not going to do as much as what you're going to do. How did we go with setting up the chat, Christian? Is that turned on so people can ask some questions as we go?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah,
Fantastic.
absolutely.
Okay, so if you're using these terms in different ways in your business, feel free, or if you've got any questions, feel free to pop them in. I'll either answer them as we go, or have some time at the end. Okay, so strategy, we need choice. With plans, what's important there, great plans prioritize actions. We need priorities, right? That's what is a key thing about planning, is to have clear priorities attached to the plans. Okay, so moving on to the next slide, then I'm going to ask, what is strategic planning, right? Because people are, keep asking. So if we move to the next slide, thank you, Christian, we can see that sometimes people combine strategy with business plans and they call it a strategic plan. And that's absolutely fine. I didn't want to get too hung up into in the terminology. But if you're calling something a strategic plan, then it has to do both those things that I mentioned. It has to have clear choice in what you're doing, and it has to have a clear priorities, that what you're doing, by when, and who's going to do it, so that it's really clear what the priorities are. Now, if we move to the next slide, I've just highlighted. We can jump even a further slide, Christian, and you can see that all those plans, whether it's a business plan, one back, we can see all those plans have the same thing in common, that word priorities in red. Okay, so now we can move to the next slide. What is the scary truth about priorities? So why does that word create so much fear in businesses? And why do people struggle so much with priorities? And the reason for that is that it's all about culture. So if we jump to the next slide, which is a prioritization matrix, many of you have seen this before, and you would have used it perhaps to prioritize your projects, or you would have been part of a discussion on priorities. And what is important about the project's prioritization is that it's used in an appropriate way in the business, so that it is that you get the buy-in, so that people in the organization have that buy-in, so that you get that pull effect in the business, so that you involve lots of different people in that process. So we've got a question
So,
from Pierre. Thank you, Pierre.
yes.
Thanks, Christian. And that is, who is the stakeholder for the strategic plan? So that's an excellent question. And you're probably not going to like my answer much, because it depends. So it depends on what size business you've got, and what sorts of stakeholders you've got in your business. So let me jump into this in a bit more detail, because stakeholders are so important. Now, if you've got a board of management, they are going to be an important stakeholder who will ultimately want to sign off a strategic plan, because it's got strategy in there. If you are just doing a business plan, which is more operational, then that might not go to the board. But again, it depends on the size of the business. So some of the businesses I work with are small VC-funded tech firms, and all the strategic plans, or even business plans, would go to the board, because they are they're direct investors in these scale-up businesses, and they really want to know exactly where their money is going and what are the priorities that they're spending money on. If it's a true strategic plan, and again, it depends how companies use the words, then it will go to the board. The CEO is often the one who is the owner of that plan, and it may be created by a group of stakeholders, depending on how the business is run. My view is that everybody in the business is actually a stakeholder, because they are all either impacted by the plan, or they have influence over the delivery of the plan. And so the best way to go about developing those plans is to get the buy-in of a cross-section across the business. And that means that potentially everybody is a stakeholder. So when I put together folks to be in workshops with the clients that I work with, or when I'm guiding and mentoring executives, we have the people in the room that are most representative of all the stakeholders, and it's sometimes done in iterative processes. So one that I did recently, where I facilitated the workshop with the executive and the board, the executive team and the board together, we had also had an iteration. It was a medium-sized business, so we had an iteration with a representation of some of the people in the business, and then we asked them to go and talk to the people that they were in their teams. So it just depends, and so that's how we got everybody's input in the business. But it's sometimes just a representative. If it's in a very large business, you might just get a cross representation of people involved that represent the different levels and different functions and geographies. So hopefully that answers your question, but feel free to jump in with more detailed questions, and then I'll come back to it at the end. So those stakeholders, why I answered that question now is that it's relevant for or the topic that I'm talking on as well, which is the project prioritization. It's relevant to that as well, because the stakeholders of the strategic plan are probably going to be, a number of them will be interested in the project prioritization as well. So it's not to say that you need your board involved in your project prioritization. Different stakeholders may need to be involved in different ways, depending on what element of the whole strategy you're working on. So hopefully that makes sense. So what I'm going to do is give you another example, which is the slide after this one, Christian. And what this is a B2B professional services firm. And this is I'll just talk through the challenges that they were facing. So they had a very siloed culture. And so this is why I wanted, the sort of unique twist, I guess, I bring to my work is really thinking of things through that holistic lens: business, change, and project, and then thinking about the culture. And this culture in this organization was a very siloed culture because they'd acquired a whole bunch of different related businesses. And there was a need to act as a group. And what they were doing was just the people were running their own separate businesses that were acquired. So what they really wanted to do is they had the strong desire to leverage clients across the group. And they weren't able to. And they had all these different ideas coming from different parts of the business, and they weren't being able to be implemented because there was just such fragmented teams. So I worked on this with a group of colleagues from the Future Builders group, and we are a group of independents that work under the Future Builders umbrella and bring different skills to the clients depending on what they need. And what we did was we co-designed the strategy and the implementation plan. So we collated all the ideas from different parts of the business, and then in this iterative series of prioritization workshops. And we had a big spreadsheet of all the ideas, and we prioritized them all together in different sessions. People went away to think and to grab some extra information and get some input from some other people. So we had a really lovely working group, a cross-functional, multidisciplinary, geographic working group. And we often use this approach to work on strategy because this is the best way of having that pull effect of getting enough people involved in the strategy from right from the start, because that really is how you get the pull effect and how you get you get people on board in that way. So if you have a look at our the Future Builders Group website, you'll see there's a bunch of blogs. I send out a newsletter every midweek. So that goes to over 7,000 business leaders, and I just love writing that. And I share 3 tips every week, and the whole idea is you can read it in under 3 minutes. And I'll share the link towards the end if you'd like to if you'd like to sign up for that. And I keep saying in there, get out of the dark room. Just get out of the dark room and do strategy work, do your planning work, do your prioritization work with people right from the beginning. That's how you get the pull effect. That's how you get people on board. That's how you get to the unicorn zone. And that's what we were doing with this client. And it was just fantastic outcomes. They had really clear focus afterwards, improved resource allocation, much better collaboration. They had nice integrated solutions for the clients, cutting across all their business lines. And they got acquired by a large global competitor at almost 70% premium to their listed price. So it was a very exciting gig and seeing the outcome. So I'm hoping that's given you some flavor of the value of having people involved, having a cross-functional project team involved in these sorts of initiatives, and doing the strategy process, the strategy formulation. It's got to be done with not two people, really, is what I'm saying. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see that, and we go back to that integrated model, you'll see, you may have seen research that tends to find a high failure rate of strategy execution, transformation, change projects. I use the words fairly interchangeably, although they're all nuanced. But most strategy these days need to be disruptive in some way because, or transformative because of what's going on in the digital world. And so the words strategy, execution, transformation, and change are all kind of morphing into one thing. And so some people disagree with the research, and that there's a 70% failure, mainly because there's not traditionally been very good ways of measuring what actually success or failure looks like. But in my experience, I've done over 50 of these sorts of transformation programs, and the failure rate's more than 50%, definitely, from observation. And I can just see how many consulting reports I come across. Pia has put in another question, which is, what is your views on the best approach to communicate the plan? And I'm going to give you an example of what leaders often do, and why the main failures of these strategies and plans are due to culture. Because people don't think about the co-design. So if you think back to strategy processes that you've seen in different organizations, think about where you've been at an all hands meeting or an offsite or a town hall, whatever you want to call it, and or whether it's on site or offsite, but it's think about one of those, and you go in there and they present the strategy to all the staff, or all the team, or the whole division, and they have a stage set and the lights are dimmed, and either that's the CEO or divisional manager coming forward onto the stage, maybe a few executives, and they're explaining what their strategy is and how often that's done in organizations. And then you listen to the conversation that happens after that. And people might make a cynical comment or two, or maybe if there's a positive comment, if you're lucky, and then the conversation will quickly switch to the latest sports team, the latest sports results, or what they've done over the weekend. And there's not a lot of interest in it because the communication of the plan has been really poor. Because when you go out and do a big drum roll and communicate the plan in a town hall, when people have not had any involvement in it before, there's no buy-in, there's not a lot of interest, and at best they'll say, that seems okay, or it's more of the same, but at worst they're going to be quite cynical. And it actually triggers, those of you who know David Rock's model, the SCARF approach, it triggers every adverse neurological reaction in the brain of people not feeling like they have that, this S is for status. They lose their status, they lose their sense of relationship, they lose their sense of autonomy. They lose their sense of fairness. I've left one of them out: relatedness, fairness, autonomy. Anyway, what I'm saying is that the best way to communicate a plan is actually to involve people in the development of some part of it. So there's always something that's up for negotiation in a plan. It's never going to be 100% just announcement, because if you want people to do something with that information, then you can get them thinking about perhaps how they're going to implement it in their area, for example, in their team. So if instead you present these are the parameters around what we're doing. Now, how do you think it should be best approached in our team? What do you think of it? What are the advantages? What do you see are the downsides? What could work well? What do we need to be aware of? What are the risks? And you develop those questions out into workshops with people to be done in their teams, or even instead of a town hall, bring everybody together into workshops. And we've done that with hundreds of people, brought them into a venue and sat them at tables. And we've done this with even a large number of organizations. I'm just thinking, in one example, we had about 200 people in the room, and they would have come from about 25, probably close to 30 organizations. And we asked them to work through the plan and together in terms of what it would mean for their people. So I can see some more questions coming through, and I might answer some more of them just towards the end. So I guess what I'm saying is there are ways of doing this. Some are better than others. When you think of what I'd ask you to do is think of your absolute best leader that you've worked with, and think about what they do well. And if I think of one of the best strategic executives that I've worked with, he always asks the team what they think. He always is open to drawing off their particular expertise, knowing that he can't possibly know everything in this complex environment. And so he draws off the team's expertise and uses that to kind of formulate a view of what's happening. And then when he does planning with his team or sub teams, different teams together, and involves people significantly in that. And doing that actually removes all the resistance, because people are just so bought in. So that by the time you're actually getting back to Pierre's question about communication of plans, by the time you've communicated the final plan, everybody's seen a version of it before, or some part of it before, and can hopefully identify their words or their input or something of theirs in it. And if you've done it in that way, then everybody is vested in your success, and that's really what you want. So the next slide is an opportunity for you to, Christian, moving on to the next slide, is an opportunity, thank you, for you to have a look at your own planning and have a look at your own the extent to which you think about those different factors, business, change, and project, across these 10 different dimensions that you can see there. So there's questions on how confident you are at all the different practices that sit underneath, understanding how to navigate culture, for example, how to design strategy, how to go about planning, and then all the other related topics like prioritization, which we've touched on, governance, stakeholders, communication, and the actual work practices. So, and then also some personal attributes of yourself in terms of how self-aware you are. So, in my research and experience of working on all these different programs and seeing what works and what doesn't work, I've put this together into a 50-question self-assessment. And I'm using it to do some organizational research by some demographic items, which is becoming extremely interesting. Some really interesting early results are appearing, and I'd like to see more results across the different demographics, and then I'll start sharing it publicly. And if you've completed that, I will make sure you get a copy of the results. So you can scan the QR code up there with your phone, or if I can ask Annabelle, who's working in supporting this this live broadcast to pop a link in the chat, in the comments. That would be fabulous. And that would be a link to Annabelle. Thank you. So that's a link to the form that's got those questions. So don't think about them in too much depth. Just put in what first comes to mind, and that is probably going to be the right answer. And that's how you fill out 50 questions in 5 minutes. And I guarantee you that'll be worth it. You will get a copy of your own results, and it will have some interesting insights in a very broad, strategic way of approaching transformation, planning, and change, and navigation of culture. So it's really quite comprehensive. Okay, so what I'm going to move on to now, which was the last topic I wanted to look at, which is some time-saving tips, please, Christian, for planning. So because of, I usually cover this in different modules of our Turbocharge membership. So I run this membership community where we, every month we do a different topic to help folks lift their transformation success score, and we cover all those areas. And a big one for the leaders that business leaders that are part of this, and program managers, they want to save time because people are so busy and so stretched at the moment. So under the sort of business category, I've got 3 things there under in terms of time saving tips that I wanted to talk about. Prioritization, which we've already covered to some extent, frameworks, and AI tools, because those are the 3 business areas where I think you're going to get your biggest bang for your buck in terms of saving time. If your priorities, as I mentioned before, are really clear across all your projects and within your plans, then you are going to get the best the best focus for your time. So have I got my pipe here on my desk? I don't think so. I have a pipe that I sometimes take along to some of my client meetings, the ones that are in person these days, because a lot of them are virtual. And this pipe is just it's just a physical ag pipe from that's used for drainage. But what I do is I explain to people, if you keep popping things into this pipe, it's going to fill up and nothing comes out the other end, and so your projects are all going to get stuck. Now, that's obvious to anybody who's got a project management background, and business people will also understand that you obviously can't do everything. But what happens is the complexity there is that everybody in an organization has got different priorities. And so if you can't get people clear and pulling all in the same direction, everybody will work on their own plans, their own priorities, their own favorite initiatives that they want to get done. They'll spend more time on the things that they care about more. So that whole pull effect, that whole idea of the bees flying in the same direction and kind of all working in the same way, just intuitively, to get the honey produced, that is what we're looking for, so that really you can get the most done in the least amount of time. Because it's very interesting, the number of organizations I come across, even very high performing teams that are or high performing people that are working together on teams, but the teams themselves aren't high performing as much as they'd want, because they haven't been able to align themselves in their priorities enough. And so everybody's stuffing more and more into the pipe and working on their favorite things, and it just really holds things up. So prioritization is really, really important. The other thing is I teach a lot of frameworks in the Turbocharge Hub, the Turbocharge membership, because I believe that a framework-driven approach is much more effective than following a distinct methodology. So if you follow a methodology, a project methodology, and it's very sort of stage driven, and you go through this stage and then you get the next stage and you get your business case signed off, and then you go through to experimentation, and then you pilot, and then there's just it's a very step-by-step approach. Like many of the project management methodologies, even agile, there are benefits to those sort of methodology driven approaches, but even more powerful is having a framework, is having the right frameworks to suit the business, to suit the culture of the organization, to get things done really quickly. So I'm a great believer in one-page executive frameworks that you and this is what I provide in the Turbocharge Hub. So when we cover a topic of change, it's like, what are the 4 or 5 key one-page frameworks that are useful on a change, from a change point of view? What are the key few frameworks that are important for planning, etc. So frameworks are, because executives love to see things in a one-page view. So if your stakeholders are like C-suite, CEOs, or board members, they will then you can present those one-page frameworks, everything on a page, and they just get it. It's like that big picture, bird's eye view level. So frameworks are very powerful. And yes, you can spend time scurrying around the internet to try and find one that suits you. But what I teach people is how to customize the frameworks to suit the business culture, how to choose the right framework to convince and to influence the right stakeholders at the right time in the right way. And then those frameworks become very, very useful in saving you time rather than having to invent everything from scratch. AI tools is the next one, and so AI tools. I can spend the whole day demonstrating AI tools to the ones that are useful, because I spend a bit of my time researching those for my clients and recommending the best ones that they can use for various projects that they're working on, various strategic initiatives. I was thinking today what I would do instead is just tell you about one. And the one that I would like to profile today is called Perplexity. If anyone's used Perplexity, please type into the chat, because I'd love to hear what you think of it. Perplexity is actually a search tool that you can use. It's a free tool that you can use instead of Google. This is why Google's terrified at the moment. And what it does is it does similar to ChatGPT. It goes and you put your query in plain English, and you put some contextual information of who your audience is or your stakeholders, and why you're asking the question and what format you want the results in. And by the way, those are the kinds of frameworks that I have in the Turbocharge Hub. Like, how do you put in a good prompt question, prompt style. A prompt, and so you put your prompt in, and what you get back from Perplexity is it goes onto a search for you, and it comes up with, instead of giving you thousands of links, mostly advertising and those that have done very well at optimizing keywords, instead of that as your search result, you actually get back a plain English answer with a whole lot of references of different sites that have been searched, that are sitting as sources for your query. So when we haven't got time to jump into this in a lot of depth, but I encourage people, when they're doing their planning, to really hold different workshops and talk to people and ask the right questions. And so all of those sorts of things are things that you can put into Perplexity. For example, your prompt could be something around that you're planning you're doing a strategic planning process, and you are thinking about what questions to ask people at a particular point in the process that you explain, and Perplexity will give you back those answers. It will tell you what kinds of questions you should ask. Or if you're going to present the final result and you're worried about getting some objections, you can ask Perplexity, like you would ask ChatGPT, what objections am I likely to get going into this meeting? And that will help you prepare really well for the meeting in a way that you've never been able to do that before, and save you so much time and grief as well. So highly encourage AI to be used at all the stages of your strategic planning. And finally, to match your plans to your culture. So if you there's lots of resources on the hub, and contact me, and I can point you in the right direction. Understand the culture that you're working in. and refine your approach of what you're doing to that culture. So if, for example, you're in that siloed culture like I was talking about in that B2B professional services firm, everybody is only thinking of their business unit. So you're never going to get a one size fits all unless you involve those business unit leaders and those people from the different business units in developing your strategy. That is key to a siloed culture. If your culture is completely different to that, for example, like a risk averse culture, then you are going to be wanting to do things in a very different way and really focus on the risks. And so all your language, all your the approach of how you run the workshops, the amount of focus that you give to risk mitigation is going to be much higher than you would in other kinds of cultures. So absolutely have a look at the culture you're working in and how can you adjust your business focus, your change focus, and your project focus to the culture that you're working in. So I'm going to move to the last, second last slide in our talk. So Christian, if you can move on one from there. And one thing, I'm going to challenge you to think about what's one thing that you'll do differently in your planning to ensure a sensational 2024. And I would absolutely love it if you would share that in the comments if you feel comfortable doing that. That would be terrific. If you don't, that's absolutely fine. And if you're watching this afterwards, I would also encourage you, if you're watching it afterwards as a recording, to challenge yourself to think about one thing that you're going to do differently. Because if you've spent, the 45 minutes or so up to now, you want to make it worthwhile and you want to be able to do something that's different. So jump into the transformation success score. That will give you some more background. Christian, if you go to the last slide, there'll also be some QR codes. If you want to subscribe to the 3 tips each week, please use your camera and scan that QR code now. If you want to be part of the transformation research, remember that it is completely confidential and you will not be identified at all in any results that are published. And please connect with me on LinkedIn as well. So that is planning. And what I'm happy to do now is I'll go back to any of the questions that are in the chat, unless, Christian, you want me to start somewhere else.
Nope. This is Pierre's last question, where you mentioned that more than 50% failure rate in transformation. What is the common theme in those projects that have failed, and what have you learned from the failures? Really good question, I think.
A really good question. So projects that have failed. So I've been really fortunate to work with some amazing people and some amazing companies, both all the way from global multinationals through to corporates and government and even non-for-profits. And in the 50, I worked out at one point that I had a 96% success rate. So only 2 out of the 50 had failed. And I can explain to you what I've learned from those failures. But if I generalize it a bit more and have a look, because part of what I've done is gone into advise, on projects that are failing, and seen in one client, there were 3 consulting reports were given at the start of the project by other firms, and not one of them had been implemented. And they were 3 different consulting firms. They were all probably, hundreds of thousands, if not over $1 million worth of work each. They big name companies, big name firms, and none of them were implemented. So I see that often, because being in a smaller business, a smaller firm, we go in and we do a lot of on the ground implementation. So we often start off where some of the big consulting firms have been, and they've given a big high level strategy, and it might be over 100 pages of PowerPoint, and it's not implemented. People don't know where to start. And so in a sense, it's been again, it depends how you measure failure. I mean, it might have been successful in terms of delivering an outcome on the strategy, but it might not have been successful in generating anything concrete coming out of it, in which case, to my view, it's been a failure. It all boils down to culture, almost everything. So you see projects where they have overspent the budget by, IT projects where they often, they're 50% plus above the spend, and that, if budget's been overspent, it's due to the people in the business and the way the projects are managed, to navigate through the culture of the business. So a lot of them are just lack of buy-in, lack of stakeholder management. Garth's put an interesting comment in here. In my experience, stakeholder alignment was one of the greatest challenges for transformation. Also, a silo company with a culture of operating autonomously, causing shadow IT. Okay, how do you create alignment with the executive team quickly? So I was just reading through that comment and thinking about it. I'll come back to alignment because I'm not sure I've completed off the previous question of peers, and I do want to give it due attention because it's a really good one. So when you talk about about failures, I've spoken about a few, like budget overruns, cost, time overruns, lack of alignment of stakeholders, which was what caught my eye in Garth's comments. Just people not being on the same page. So what I've learned from the two failures that I've had as well is that not everything is directly, in your control, in each person's control. But one has to find ways to, early on, to meet enough stakeholders so that you can influence the outcomes, even if they are a little bit outside your remit. So let me explain what I mean. So the one major stuff up which I've carried with me for decades was when I ran a program to develop a business plan for a business that was a division of a business that was losing money. And the steering committee was each of the different functional executives, and there were about 6 of those or 7 of those, memory. And they had got rid of 2 project program managers before me, so I should have known that there was it wasn't going to be an easy one. And unfortunately, I could not get everybody, all the stakeholders, onto the same page. So this is talking about my failure, and actually, it will one of my 2 big failures. And Garth, this will partly answer your question as well. I had so many corridor conversations with these folks to try before each steering committee to stop the infighting amongst them and the lack of agreement. And it was just like herding cats; could not get alignment. My project sponsor, executive sponsor, or the person who'd hired me to run this program for them was the marketing director, and he was not able to. He was at the same level of all the rest of his colleagues and was not able to. There was no form of tiebreaker when there was lack of agreement, and he was unable to put his foot or unwilling to put his foot down. So what happened at the end is that he lost his job. The 2 people that were on the project team working with me, who were absolute stars in the organization, high performers on the fast track, both resigned very shortly after the sponsor was let go. And within about 6 months, I'd heard that every executive, including the CEO, every executive except one had lost their jobs, and the CEO had also was replaced. So it was a major stuff up. And what I have thought is if I had my time over again, I was a young woman working, and I'm not blaming it on that, but I guess I didn't have the confidence then to go and meet the CEO and spend enough time with the CEO to get to know him and explain to him that he needed to be on that steering committee, or because there was nobody senior enough to sort out the different factions, and the project sponsor that I had was unable to do that. But it just sort of goes to show that if to create alignment, so you need sometimes where there's disagreement, you need, and people are only thinking of the silos that they're in. You need some way, I've learned, of getting people to think outside their silos for the benefit of the business overall. Or you need somebody senior enough to make the really hard calls when people under them are not prepared to do so, because they're only thinking of their own patch. So hopefully that will answer Pierre's question around what I've learned from the failures, because it's all about people. It's all about understanding the culture and how decisions are made in the culture. If I now move on to the question of how do you create alignment with the executive team quickly, when it's really difficult because people have vested interests in different things, then I think the thing that's worked really well there is to agree some parameters or rules of the game before getting into the nitty-gritty of the decisions where there are going to be disagreements. So you almost we call them, when you're doing a restructure, you kind of agree the structural parameters. When you're doing a business plan, you agree the parameters, the design considerations, if you like. And then once you know the rules of the game and everybody's agreed to them, then it becomes a lot easier to get alignment on the substantive issues. So let me give you an example. In one structure change, and I know we're running out of time, so I'll just finish here because it's probably going to be our last question. And Garth, you've said very similar experience to me. The CEO needed to drive this, and in my case, he treated this as an IT project as opposed to strategic KPI. Okay, great. So thank you. So that is really, really interesting. And not all CEOs are, by the way, are they going to be the panacea for all of that? And if you've got a CEO who does not have that strength, then you're in the wrong place, and there's nothing you're going to be able to do really if the person, the fishes are rotting from the head, unless you have a good board, and then can go and talk to the chair of the board, and if that door is open. Very difficult. So creating alignment with the executive team quickly. I've lost my train of thought because I was explaining something to you. Sorry, that extra question jumped into that extra comment jumped into my head, and I've lost the thread I was talking about. Alignment, executive team. It'll come back to me if sorry, I've just totally lost the thread of that. Christian, do you recall specifically? I was going to explain what happened in the end of that particular story, and it's gone. Not a good way to end the hour. We can chat offline. Okay, perfect. Oh, thank you for that. Fantastic. Well, thank you, everybody. That was some really, really insightful questions there, and no problem at all, Garth. I love getting all these questions in here, and I did want to say something else about that story, but it's just the thread has totally gone out of my head now. Creating alignment with the team quickly, bringing everybody all onto one page. Anyway, it'll come back to me. So hopefully you all got some value out of this conversation and out of the presentation today. I look forward to hearing from you, and please feel free to follow up with any questions. Would love to hear that, to hear from you. And yeah, call it an evening, call it a morning for you guys. Let you off to go to the rest of your day. Christian, back to you.
Yes, so basically, I've just got the ticker at the bottom. Please connect with Lisa on LinkedIn and have a look at our website, futurebuildersgroup.com. So take note, and then I guess you'll be able to connect with Lisa on LinkedIn and take the conversation offline. How does that sound?
Perfect. Thanks, Christian.
All
Thank
right.
you for the questions, everybody, and the participation. That's been great.
Okay, perfect. And I'm going to sign off. Thanks everybody for joining today's masterclass, and we hope to catch you in the next one. All right. Thanks everybody.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Cheers.